Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome, data center industry, to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Live Q&A show. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. Each week, I address a handful of the most pressing questions across the entire data center ecosystem, including data center operators, technology and facilities companies that sell into or partner with the data center industry, real estate and construction companies, sales and marketing companies that sell to or partner with the data center industry. And we include the entire GTM, the entire go-to-market team: sales, marketing, customer success and account managers, product managers, channel partnership managers, and executive sponsors. This week, we have a very special roundup of 6 different questions that I will be addressing. On the agenda for today, we have how to engage with data center providers to manage greenhouse gas emissions and carbon data. Very much a sustainability theme. The next question we'll get into is how to fix low sales, sluggish sales of data center infrastructure. Next, we'll turn our attention to how to close more sales for data center, cloud, and hybrid IT services. After that, we'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor. Then we'll return with the second half of 3 additional questions for today. The first up in the second half will include: how can a data center product manager support and guide sales? I think for a lot of people in and around the data center industry, they sometimes forget that product managers form an essential part of figuring out their go-to-market and executing on their go-to-market strategy. Next, we'll turn our attention to how to improve data center sales results from marketing campaigns and brand visibility. And then we'll head down the home stretch this week by looking at how to find the right sales agents for AI and multi-cloud data center strategy. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and without any further ado, let's jump into this week's first question. How do we engage with data center providers to manage greenhouse gas emissions and carbon data? How do we engage with data center providers to manage greenhouse gas emissions and carbon data? That is a fantastic question. And the answer from a starting point really depends on whether you are an established business or whether you're a startup. Unfortunately, I don't have the context on whether your company already has a big list of existing customers and clients that you're trying to clone and replicate and get more of, or whether you're trying to figure out exactly who the ideal client is for this and get to product market fits. We're going to go with somewhere in between the 2 extremes, between a startup and a very well-established company that has dozens or hundreds or maybe even thousands of data center providers where they're giving advice on managing greenhouse emissions and carbon data. So we're going to go with the idea that there's at least a couple handfuls of existing clients that you've done these engagements well for. And the way we're going to know that is we're going to look at the website and we're going to read the case studies and we're going to look at the reviews. We're going to look at the testimonials and we're going to try to find pattern recognition among those where we've been most successful in making a positive impact in helping those providers reduce greenhouse emissions and better manage their carbon data. So what do they have in common? Is there a certain geographic area that we've worked in and been more successful than others? For example, maybe it's just the United States, or maybe it's just the European Union, or maybe it's all of EMEA. So first up, what's the geographic area? Then second, what size data center providers have been the best fit? Are these enterprise data center providers like hyperscalers where there's thousands of employees? Or are they mid-sized data center providers where there's maybe anywhere from a couple dozen up to maybe 500 or 1,000 employees? Or are these small upstart data center providers, maybe single location or 2 or 3 location co-location providers where there's a few dozen employees or fewer? So let's first figure out what they have in common geographically. Then next up, let's figure out what they have in common size-wise. With those 2 factors, we'll be in a much better position to build an effective go-to-market strategy to attract and engage with those kinds of companies. So we'll define our ideal client profile because we'll now know the geographic factors, the size factors, their business model. We know they're all data center providers operating in and around the digital infrastructure industry, IT services, network services, whatever you want to call it. So now that we have our ideal client profile defined at a company level, we can build a target account list of the companies that we want to target. Usually anywhere from a few dozen to maybe a few thousand at the absolute most. For most companies, it's probably somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. And once we've set about understanding at the company level what we're trying to do, we need to understand the individuals that we need to attract and engage with throughout their full buyer's journey. When it comes to greenhouse emissions and carbon data, this is almost certainly on the facilities side of a data center as opposed to the technology side or the real estate side. This would be on the facility side. So we need to understand who are the stakeholders that we need to build relationships with, who are the stakeholders that need to see our company as the go-to experts on anything and everything having to do with greenhouse emissions and carbon data in the data center industry. How do we become the Wikipedia of greenhouse emissions and carbon data in the industry? How do we be seen not only as subject matter experts, but teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, and thought leaders? And the better job you can do with lifting your brand reputation in the space to be able to convey and put that flag in the ground and be able to make your whole go-to-market team an extension of that, the better job you're going to do with engaging data center providers in insightful conversations about helping them improve and get their hands around how to better deal with greenhouse emissions and carbon data. And so once you know the buyer personas that are important, the kind of stakeholder you want to engage with, then you'll likely prioritize which is the most. Maybe it's a facilities manager or a director of facilities. Maybe there's a secondary stakeholder, primary and a secondary buyer persona. Then within each of those groups of people, we need to figure out what's going on up here. What are their priorities? What are their biggest goals? Are they evaluated on? What are their annual reviews going to be based on? How do they know if they're successful? And then conversely, what are their biggest struggles, their biggest challenges? What is stressing them out to no end? What's causing them to lose sleep, miss time away from friends and family, loved ones, screw up their vacation, make PTO, their paid time off, literally an unfortunate casualty of these things that are stressing out. So once we know what is really going on inside of these stakeholders' lives, then we need to develop a plan for educating and building trust around those topics that are most important to them. Not the topics that are most important to you, but especially in the early and middle stages of the buyer's journey, when most of these buyers nearly unanimously prefer a self-service motion. Gartner found 83% of a typical journey is over before you meet prospects. During that 83%, those first 15 or 20 of the 28 touch points, how are you going to show up in a way that educates and builds trust with the facilities directors, the key stakeholders, the key influencers, the decision makers in this process? It's by meeting them where they are and providing helpful information that allows them to do their jobs better, that gets them to not only get answers to their biggest questions, but anticipates what they're going to want to know next and guides them along that full journey. So when they get to the decision stage in their researching and comparing options and evaluating pricing, it's a no-brainer that you and your team are on their short list. And if you do this right, you're the entire short list. So those are some tips on how you can more effectively engage with data center providers that are strongly interested in addressing problems around greenhouse gas emissions and carbon data. Next question. How do we fix low sales of data center infrastructure? So sales are slumping of our data center infrastructure. What is going on? Well, when it comes to a product-related and a sales-related conversation and potentially a marketing and a customer success conversation, we need to convene the full team. We need everyone, not everyone, but a representative from each of the 5 or 6 disciplines through the go-to-market team to have an equal seat at the table and an equal voice in addressing this. So go get your leader from marketing and sales and and customer success or account management and product strategy and channel strategy and your executive sponsor together and brainstorm what's really going on. When did these sales slumps start to happen? By saying low sales, I'm anticipating that there were higher sales at one point and now there's lower sales. Maybe they've always been lower sales. But what lower sales typically indicates is there's either something that's no longer competitive about your product, or there's external market conditions that have made your product less relevant, or maybe you just never got product market fit in the first place. Now, product market fit is the degree to which you have really tight clarity, precision around who your ideal clients are, what they buy, what in this case infrastructure, products or services they're buying from your company, and what price points and how often they buy these services, or for what kind of duration, if it's a managed agreement or IaaS agreement or something like that. So in order to address low sales, in order to address demand that has not yet scaled, we're many times dealing with a product market fit problem. Sometimes it's a go-to-market fit problem. The big difference between go-to-market fit and product market fit is go-to-market fit is once we have a tight idea of who the clients are, what they buy, how much they pay, and how often they buy them. Once we have those answers, how do we pour jet fuel on everything to make it go faster? How do we scale up demand generation? How do we scale up lead generation, nurturing, sales cycle acceleration, segmentation, all the things that help us scale growth more effectively? And I've been talking for years about the pillars of growth, including differentiation, competitive positioning, thought leadership, scale, and sales cycle acceleration, leading to scalable, predictable revenue growth. So in order to address this issue with the low sales, we need to get more precise. Did we ever have higher sales, or has it always been lower sales? And then when it comes to sales, your head of sales should be able to go to your deals board, should be able to go to the pipeline and figure out if there's actually blockage points that are sitting there relative to what they normally would expect. Are there things that are not progressing from discovery to exploratory? Are there proposals that aren't closing? Like, where relative to what they typically would expect based on your existing benchmarks or what you'd expect within the industry as a whole, are things breaking down? And then from a product perspective and from a marketing perspective, when you, and sales to a certain degree as well, when you're speaking with clients, when you're speaking with prospects, what kinds of questions are coming up that you haven't yet answered? What kind of objections are coming up that you haven't been able to overcome? Generally, the best way to understand this isn't just by looking at what's going on in the CRM and what's going on in your dashboards. It's by getting closer to your clients that matter most. And this is something that I see a lot of smaller companies struggling with, is they don't exactly know who the clients are that matter most. But yeah, this is for sure where it's really important to be very tight about your ideal client profile and prioritizing your buyer personas. Because not all clients are created equal. Not all clients are strategically aligned with your product roadmap. And when it comes to addressing slumping sales, it rarely is just one particular part of the GTM of the go-to-market that's breaking down. Usually it's a little bit of everything. In some cases, there's a clear-cut issue. Maybe in the past you've invested aggressively in marketing and some brainiac on your board decided to cut marketing from being really aggressive down to zero marketing. Maybe in the past you had great sales development reps that were very good at taking early stage leads and staying with them throughout the journey and passing them off at some point to account executives. And maybe again, I hate to vilify the board, but maybe someone on the board says, get rid of all the SDRs. That's the problem. And then all of a sudden, great. So it's really important to know your process. It's important to know your benchmarks. It's important to know where it's breaking down. And obviously, a lot of this depends on unit economics. If you're selling commoditized data center infrastructure where it really does need to be self-service, then yeah, of course you need to make investments in your website and user research and usability testing and conversion rate optimization. If you're selling a 7-figure, 8-figure kind of data infrastructure offering, That's almost certainly not going to be purchase self-service, and you need to think about how you're supporting the full buyer's journey. And at that price point, there's typically lots of different stakeholders that are involved. So what you're doing with segmentation and personalization, the job to be done, and supporting the full journey. So contextualizing this for what stage your company is at, what stage of product maturity your company is at, what size your company is at, makes a world of difference in how we approach it. But those are some of the general things that I'd be thinking about with a holistic approach to addressing low sales of your company's data center infrastructure products or services. Next question. How do we close more sales for data center, cloud, and hybrid IT services? How do we close more sales for data center, cloud, and hybrid IT services? First, we need to figure out, are these 3 different lines of business that need 3 different go-to-market playbooks? Are they at vastly different price points, or are most of your clients buying data center and hybrid IT and cloud services from your company in a single transaction, in a single closed deal? Only you can answer that, but it's certainly a big part of how to address this. At the risk of oversimplifying, I find for the most part, a lot of accelerating sales in the data center industry comes down to some pretty basic things that in larger companies are pretty well covered, but in small and mid-sized companies, not so much. At the most basic level, as long as you understand your ideal client profile, and as long as you understand your buyer personas and their biggest goals and their biggest challenges, it's very unusual for investments in email marketing and event marketing not to help solve and accelerate some of those closing sales faster challenges and closing sales. Let's put this in a more positive spin. Once you understand at the company level who you want to be selling to and servicing, who makes a great client, how do they get great value, and who are the people, the kinds of people within those accounts, then we need to make sure that we have great premium content offers, exceptionally helpful email marketing that's specific to a particular person and where they are in their journey, and a webinar program that supports the full buyer's journey for each one of those buyer personas. Those are table stakes today. I get people that come to me every once in a while, and they think that somehow the customers, the digital transformation oriented buyer personas that they sell to, for some reason, are going to be allergic to email marketing, and they're never going to go on LinkedIn. They're never going to watch a YouTube video. They're never going to attend a webinar. Like, what kind of nonsense are you feeding yourself for limiting beliefs here? This is the playbook that has worked exceptionally well for the last 10 years. It continues to work exceptionally well because you're solving for one huge objective, actually a 2-pronged objective: educating and building trust. And the better job your company can do at educating and building trust with the right people, in the right places, at the right time, most of all, for the right reasons to have with them, sticking with you throughout the full buyer's journey. So the goal is to intercept them as early as possible in their research and decision-making process, in the awareness stage of the buyer's journey, so that we can stay with them not only throughout awareness to consideration to decision, but throughout all 28 of those touch points. All too often, companies that are heavily involved in selling data center services, cloud services, hybrid IT services are investing really aggressively in field event marketing, but are completely neglecting everything that happens after the person leaves that event. And you've probably heard me say before, but you can have the most epic cabana party poolside in Vegas. You can have the most amazing golf tournament where you're pairing up your prospects and clients with celebrity retired PGA golfing stars. But those are only 1 or 2 of the 28 touch points that you typically find between complete stranger and purchase decision. What are you going to do the other 364 days of the year? Because no matter how much you'd like to think that, oh, they'll just wait till next year's party, they'll wait till next year's golf tournament. Really? When the stuff is hitting the fan, they're going to sit there and wait. Highly unlikely. When the stuff is hitting the fan, they're asking for advice like crazy. They're asking Google, Siri, Alexa, Cortana. ChatGPT, Copilot. They're posting questions on Slack, Discord, LinkedIn. They want advice from their friends. They call this dark social, but at any rate, digital word of mouth is incredibly important, and it's really hard to do that well if you don't have a structured program for staying with the right people throughout their full buyer's journey. So understand who your company targets are, understand the primary and secondary buyer personas that you need to be building a relationship with, do the research, figure out what's top of mind for each of those buyer personas, their biggest goals and challenges, and then develop a full journey program supported by email marketing, supported by events, especially webinars, that allows you to stay with them throughout their full buyer's journey. That's the unlock to be able to close more sales with data center, cloud, and hybrid IT services clients. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and address 3 more questions.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Welcome back. Joshua Feinberg here from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you are watching or you are listening to the weekly live stream show, Data Market, Go-to-Market, Sales and Marketing Q&A. 3 more questions that we're going to address this week that are top of mind for go-to-market professionals just like yourselves in and around the data center industry. So next question, how can a data center product manager support and guide sales? This is super interesting because so many people in the data center industry are sleeping on the idea that product is a big unlock around growth. I think in technology companies and facilities companies, it's far more likely that you're going to come across a product manager. But in small and mid-sized operators, in real estate companies and construction companies, someone is wearing the hat of being a product expert, product strategist, product manager, but it's not always that much of a tightly defined role or a tightly defined team. In other words, when you're looking for like a VP of product or a chief product officer, a CPO or something like that within the data center ecosystem, it's far more likely that you're going to find an individual with that title in a technology or facilities kind of company or in a large operator, a large colo provider, a hyperscale, large wholesale provider, perhaps an edge or modular provider. But that mindset is super important because at the end of the day, sales rarely is figuring out product roadmap. They're providing input on product roadmap, but they're certainly not going to do all the R&D and the engineering to figure out what your products and services look like unless they happen to also be wearing the hat of head of product. And in really early stage companies, it's very likely that a founder or co-founder is taking on several of these roles across the full go-to-market team, across marketing, sales, customer success, product management, channel partnerships, and executive sponsor. However, at the next stage of growth, 11 to 50 employees or 50 to 200 employees, where we start to get into true mid-market and eventually into enterprise, it's super important that when you get beyond, what did Jeff Bezos call it, the 2 pizza rule, as he never wants to have a team that's bigger that needs more than 2 pizzas for having a lunch meeting. Once you get to the point, let's see, there's 16 slices of pizza. Most people would eat 2 slices for lunch. Once you get to the point that there's more than 8 people in total on your go-to-market team, like, yeah, you need more structure to this. So what does the product manager have in common with the buyer's journey, with what needs to happen with marketing and sales? So what's super interesting is when marketing and sales enablement are very focused on the company being seen as subject matter experts and thought leaders and having this great educational content, it's highly likely that they're investing in buyer persona research. And if you have the luxury of having a well built out client list. The best buyer persona research is like this, either in webcams or going out to visit clients face to face. The next best is surveys, looking at how your ideal clients and buyer personas describe themselves and what you can glean about them by studying these folks and how they describe themselves and their interactions and what they're into. When you see footprints and fingerprints for them on social media and search engine results, you'd be amazed when you're trying to get inside the mind of a product manager, how much you can learn from watching them give a talk at a conference and finding 4, 5, 6 people give talks at conferences or appear on podcast interviews or webinar panels or something like that in their own words. That's the key thing, is we can't make assumptions about what we think a product manager does. If we want to truly nail that buyer persona, we need to get inside his or her mind. And the way we do that is we do actual research and limited educated speculation on their biggest goals and challenges. So the best way that a product manager can support and guide sales is having really good alignments and plugging themselves into sales meetings in the same way that the marketing person, or what I'd call the media person, who's the podcast producer, the webinar producer, the orchestrator of all this stuff, they also should be plugged into a lot of these sales conversations, attending as many actual meetings as possible or watching the recordings. Because when a salesperson is constantly running up against resistance where things that ought to have been closable are not closing because of some gap in your product roadmap, it is incredibly important for that incident, for that interaction, for that almost closable information to be reported from sales over to product. And it's even better for product to hear directly from the mouths of the prospects who were just about ready to sign a huge deal with your company if you could have just had this one feature. And they said, oh yeah, and by the way, Sally, by the way, Bob, I have 3 other friends that I've worked with over the years in similar roles in other kinds of companies that would also be willing to sign up at least for a pilot if you close that feature gap sometime in the near future. It's incredibly important that you have good working relationship, good collaboration across your full go-to-market team. It is incredibly important that you have a good working relationship and collaboration across sales and product. And because customer success account managers typically come in between sales and product roadmap related discussions, they many times should be involved in there as well, because in most cases, once that deal closes, that's who's going to own the client relationship. And if there's anything that sales overpromised where your company is going to overdeliver, customer success account managers are the ones that are going to have to scotch tape and bubble gum and duct tape the whole thing together. But we know that that's not sustainable either, which is why it's so incredibly important for product to be involved in those conversations. In terms of other healthy working relationships between product and sales, battle cards, competitive battle cards. That's usually something that is done between product marketing or marketing, a hybrid of a little bit of sales enablement, a little bit of product management, a little bit of product marketing. And again, the bigger your company is, the more likely that there's defined specialists just doing these tools and resources. Website copywriting, website explainer videos, another key area where product hits sales and sales enablement and hits product marketing. And again, in smaller companies, it may just be a handful of people that are responsible for all of this. In much larger companies, these things are going to be decided by committee, and things that could be done potentially in a couple of days will somehow end up taking a couple of months to build consensus and go through all the approvals and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it is incredibly important for your product managers to have good working relationships with your sales counterparts. Next question. How can you improve data center sales results from marketing campaigns and brand visibility? So how do you improve sales results in and around the data center from marketing campaigns and brand visibility? That's a fantastic question. And I want to contextualize this because in the data center industry, it doesn't matter whether you're located in the United States or Canada or somewhere in Europe or the Middle East or Africa or in Latin America or Asia Pacific. The data center industry loves big conferences, loves conferences. We estimate back of napkin in some of these regions, there's somewhere between $250 million and $500 million a year being spent on these conferences, not to mention all the stuff that gets shipped in and out and all the people flying in and out of it. So obviously there's carbon and sustainability implications as well. So given these huge costs and the huge opportunity costs of investing aggressively in field and event marketing, it is incredibly important that you squeeze every last ounce of sales and revenue generating and brand building that you possibly can out of these investments. And one of the most important ways to do this is to start by getting crystal clear about whether this particular event fits your business growth goals. So when you look at the demographics of last year's attendees, and when you look at the predicted demographics of this year's attendees, how good is that match between your ideal client profile and your most important buyer personas? I hope it's really strong. If it's not, you have a bigger issue. Once you know that, it becomes incredibly important to get the most impactful people interacting with you at that particular event. Looking at your target account list, looking at your buyer personas, and trying to figure out who's going to be there. The more proactive you are about doing this, the better off you're going to be. And whether it's scheduling meetings, whether it's getting certain groups of people to attend and participate in educational experiences, like if you are fortunate enough to have someone on the speaker's agenda who's presenting a session, incredibly important to have the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context where they see folks from your company being put up on the pedestal as industry experts. And it's very important to think about what you need to get done before, during, and after that event. I see so many companies that are, I don't want to say dropping the ball, but could be doing way more post-event to get way more from those marketing campaign and brand building huge investments. Because again, you think about a full buyer's journey, awareness, consideration, decision. We know at any given time, there's only 5 or 10 people, 5 or 10% of the people are in market for your product or service. So what do we do with the 85, 90, 95% who could be a great fit in a couple weeks or a couple months if we can keep in touch with them and stay in a tight relationship where they allow us to continue educating and building trust with them, where they see us as the go-to subject matter experts in the space, as trusted advisors, as consultants, as teachers, as thought leaders. In order to do that, we need to recognize that that marketing campaign that was centered around that event and that brand building was 1 or 2 touch points. There's typically 28 touch points between complete stranger and a considered purchase decision. So what are we going to do with the other 26 touch points? Pray, hope? Is that really the plan? We're going to hope that somehow magically they remember to come back to us. We're going to hope that they don't have this need accelerating and escalating between now and the next 364 days. We're going to repeat this event. That doesn't seem that likely of a strategy to click. What's far more likely is that if we know the company they're from, we know the role that we're in, we know what the biggest goals are, we know what the biggest challenges are that someone is facing in that role, that we develop a proactive plan to stay with them throughout the buyer's journey. In most cases, in today's data center go-to-market playbook, this is going to involve some pretty significant investments in getting your segmentation right in your CRM, your customer relationship management software, in your marketing technology and sales technology, having incredibly tightly relevant email marketing that shows up exactly at the right time with the right kind of messaging for the right person. And that continues to rain value down on them long before you try to extract value out of the relationship bank account. So we're continuing to teach them. We're continuing to educate them. We're continuing to proactively answer their questions and help stay with them throughout the journey that we know they're going to be going on because we've taken so many other people on that. We've guided so many people through that journey in the past. Email marketing, webinars, that is almost certainly the great big unlock to getting more value, getting more data center sales results from your marketing campaigns and brand visibility. Remember, the brand, how we define it today, is way more than just your color chart and your fonts and your logos. And what kills me is there are still companies that put a creative person, that put a well-intentioned designer in charge of all of marketing. And that approach may have kind of sort of worked 20 years ago, but in a world where 83% of the buyer's journey now happens before prospects are willing to engage with your sales team, that is a very, very dangerous delegation and abdication strategy. It's incredibly important that we have a way to stay with our most important buyer personas throughout the full buyer's journey. Otherwise, somebody else is going to fill that void. Somebody else is going to educate and build trust with them. Someone else is going to help them frame all of the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the options in front of them. And that somebody else is going to cause your most important buyer personas to fall in love with that company's content and fall in love with that company's brand. And who do you think is going to end up at the top of the short list when they switch over from consideration to the decision stage of the buyer's journey? If you've been phoning it in and asleep at the wheel, it's probably not going to be you. So if you're serious about getting more sales results from your marketing campaigns and your brand investments, let's get realistic about how modern data center buyers navigate the buyer's journey, how they research their available options, how they compare their available options, how they evaluate pricing in the modern journey where sales is no longer in charge. What are we going to do to make sure that our marketing team can go deeper into the journey than they ever have in the past? And what are we going to do to empower our sales development reps, our account executives to come back and participate much earlier in the buyer journey than they ever have in the past, so that all of your team members are seen as the go-to experts in this space? That is the unlock to getting more sales results from your marketing campaigns and branding investments. And the final question for today: how do we find the right sales agents for AI, artificial intelligence, and multi-cloud data center storage? So first up is this two different lines of business. Is AI a different line of business? Is data center multi-cloud storage a different line of business, or are they all one and the same? Are most of your multi-cloud data center storage clients going to have AI capabilities either natively built in or through an add-in, or is it two completely different ideal client profiles, two different sets of buyer personas? If you are a hyperscaler, they are almost certainly joined at the hip. It's hard to imagine a hyperscaler doing public cloud, private cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid, any of this stuff successfully going forward without having a AI strategy part of their playbook. If nothing else, your company is going to be capital starved because Wall Street is in love with anyone that puts AI into their quarterly reports and projections now. Whether it's hype or not, whether the roadmap can really deliver on it today, but it's hard to imagine the multi-cloud data center storage company not joining AI at the hip going forward. So with this in mind, sales agents, finding the right sales agents. For starters, we need to figure out what business we're really in. What's the job to be done that we're actually performing? So many companies don't have clarity around this, because once we know what our ideal clients are actually hiring our company to do, and by doing that, what they're implicitly firing all of the competitive alternatives that are in them, it becomes so much easier to build an effective go-to-market strategy, to build our ideal client profile, to define and prioritize the buyer personas that matter most. But until we get clarity about what business we're really in, a lot of this is just hypothesis. A lot of this is just guesswork. Once we have that defined, it becomes much easier to figure out the right sales agents to hire. And I hesitate to use the word agent because it seems really commoditizing. It seems really denigrating. It seems really condescending and talking down to people that we should be elevating. I like to think of sales professionals of the future in the data center industry as the new teachers, the new trusted advisors, the consultants, the subject matter experts, the thought leaders. And maybe if you're at the beginning of your sales career in the data center industry, you're not quite ready to be the thought leader. But what you can do within a matter of weeks or months is to consume all of the other thought leadership that your company is currently producing and be the best concierge, the best tour guide, the best curator of helping your prospects and future clients to understand all of the great educational resources that you have made investments in to be available for them. So I don't see transactional sales agents as having much of a future in a self-guided, self-propelled buyer's journey where the buyers are in the driver's seat and now do not want to have much, if any, contact with your sales team until they're 83% of the way through their buyer's journey. Again, Gartner found that 83% of a typical B2B purchase decision, including researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, now happens before sales contact. Is there a role for a transaction-oriented sales agent in that map going forward? I don't think so. I think because low tickets, low unit economics, IaaS businesses, infrastructure as a service businesses, and I would say multi-cloud data center storage could actually be considered part of that. Low ticket stuff is almost certainly going to have to become self-service. It's just not going to be cost effective to have field salespeople or inside salespeople or even a call center to be able to do this. It's going to have to be self-driven, as self-provisioning, self-sign-up as much as possible on the really low ticket stuff. At the other extreme, where you're talking about huge 7- and 8-figure enterprise deals, of course, there's going to still continue to be, in most cases, a significant role for the sales professional in the future. But the sales professional in the future who is involved in-on deals for AI and multi-cloud data center storage is going to look a lot more like a Big Four consultant. Their interactions with prospects, with clients are going to seem a lot more like that prospect is getting free consulting from someone that worked for a Big Four firm like PwC or KPMG or EY or Deloitte. It's going to be that helpful, that insightful. The last thing your prospects need in a mid-market enterprise deal is for someone to come along and read them the contents of what's on your website. Because in many cases, your prospects are showing up more educated about your products and services than many of your relatively newly hired entry-level reps. So is there even a role for sales agents in the future? I don't know. I think the sales professional in the future is going to be more of a consultant. Other big piece of advice when it comes to building a sales team is pay attention to two contextual issues. One is if you're hiring people that are experienced sales professionals, what size of deals have they sold in the past? Because selling to SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses, is very different than selling to mid-market and enterprise accounts, both on the average deal size, the amount of stakeholders are involved, the amount of multi-threading skill sets that are involved to figure out the org chart and dealing with all the different stakeholders. Very, very different depending on the size of company you're targeting. And it's also very important to look at their LinkedIn, look at their CV or their resume if you're still using that. I think in most cases, if you're not evaluating a candidate's LinkedIn profile, you're probably very much living in the past. But look at the size of companies that they've worked with. If you are a startup in AI and multi-cloud data center storage, and you're hiring a logo hire, meaning somebody that worked for a big brand in the space, like they worked for Google Cloud or AWS or Azure or something like that, and that person has never worked for a startup before, be prepared for some serious deer in headlights moments. Because when they arrived at that company, there was already hundreds, if not thousands of sales professionals using a playbook that was on iteration 117. They didn't have to operate in the position of extreme uncertainty that a startup operates in, where there's no brand to build on. There may not even be product market fit, let alone go to market fit. And they just have to wear an incredible amount of hats. They have to deal with getting these things done without having a lot of internal resources, or in some cases, no internal resources at their disposal to help figure this out. So if we get past the idea that agent is really denigrating and condescending, and we consider that these are sales professionals they're hiring, in terms of finding the right ones, look at the average company size and average deal size that they've done in the past, and look at the size of companies that they've worked at in the past to get a feel for their comfort level in working with a company that is at your stage of maturity, your stage of resources, and how they can snap in and hit the ground running, with a reasonable ramp up time and a reasonable average sales cycle length. And again, those are for startups. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what the ramp time is really going to be. You don't really know what the sales cycle length is going to be if you've only ever done founder-led sales. So these are all many of the considerations to be thinking about when it comes to finding the right kind of sales agents for a company that's focused on AI and multi-cloud data center storage. So that brings us to the end of our questions for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. I'm so happy that you were able to join us this week. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of data center sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To make sure that you stay up to date on what we're working on and get notified about upcoming shows, make sure you subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter by visiting the DCSMI website at dcsmi.com. Again, I wish you great success in growing your go-to-market, growing your sales and marketing results, and elevating your role within your team, your company, and the industry as a whole to much more dramatically impact the growth of the data center industry. Be well, stay safe, take care, and I look forward to seeing you back again next week. Take care now.